I have always been drawn to the stories that make you check the locks twice. The ones told in hushed tones around late-night fires, or found in creased journals detailing encounters that defy all logic. From whispering ghosts in abandoned hallways to shadowy encounters in quiet woods. These are the tales of terrors that lurk just beyond the edge of our vision. So turn the lights down low and get ready to confront what goes bump in the night. You're listening to Don't Whistle to the Wind. Hello, and welcome in, my little horror fiends, to episode 7 of Don't Whistle to the Wind. On this episode, I will be reading you stories that involve 6 famously haunted hotels from around the US. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Our first story involves a stay at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. It was exactly midnight when I turned the key to room 428 on the 4th floor of the Stanley Hotel. The air in the room was a bit stifling, so I opened the wide windows before turning in for the night. Outside, the Rocky Mountains were nothing but a wall of blackness, with howling mountain wind blowing through the trees. I was dead tired from the drive, but sleep refused to come. Every light was off, yet the room felt off, as if I wasn't alone, as if it was occupied by something or someone other than me. At 1:47 a.m., the temperature in the room plummeted, and I, still groggy from sleep, remembered I had left the windows open, but instead of getting up to close them, I pulled the heavy comforter up to my chin and tried to go back to sleep. Not even a few seconds later, I felt the unmistakable sensation of weight at the foot of my bed. The heavy mattress dipped, as if a grown man had just sat on the edge of the covers right by my feet. My breath caught in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was just my sleepy brain conjuring up things that weren't there. But then I felt it. Something large and cold began to crawl slowly up the length of my legs, pressing down on the comforter. I bolted upright and quickly flicked on the bedside lamp. The covers were severely indented, as if someone had just been lying there, but the surface of the bed smoothed itself out the exact second the light turned on. I scrambled to my feet, blood roaring in my ears as I backed away. In my peripheral view, I saw movement in one of the corners of the room. Standing eerily still in the deep shadows was a tall man wearing a wide-brimmed cowboy hat, silhouetted against the dark window pane. He wasn't solid. He looked like a smoky distortion of the air. He slowly turned his head to look directly at me. There were no eyes, just a wispy, shadowy face, but I could feel the intensity of his stare. I didn't stick around to see what would happen next. I grabbed my phone, threw open the room door, and ran out into the empty hallway, not daring to look back until I reached the safety of the lobby. I took the stairs 2 at a time, almost tripping as I frantically descended. The desk clerk saw my state of fear but didn't jump up to meet me halfway or ask, "What's wrong?" He simply asked for my room number, as if this was just another day for him, called a security guard, who then escorted me back to my room to get my belongings, and I checked out of the hotel, refusing to ever go back. Our second story is about a stay in the Crescent Hotel and Spa in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. The deadbolt finally clicked into place, securing me inside room 218. The air was remarkably cold despite the thermostat settings, smelling faintly of various cleaning supplies. I had read the local legends about Michael, the Irish stonemason who plunged to his death during the hotel's construction, and wanting to experience an encounter myself, I booked a room in the Crescent Hotel. Shaking off the jitters of excitement, I unpacked my bags and headed into the bathroom to wash my face. I leaned over the pedestal sink, splashing ice-cold water on my cheeks, when the hair on my arms stood up and goosebumps started to form all over my body. I looked up. A thin layer of condensation coated the antique mirror. My breath hitched. Through the cloudy glass, the silhouette of a tall, broad-shouldered man began to form directly behind my reflection. He was wearing rough, 18th century work clothes. I whipped around, my heart pounding like it was going to beat out of my chest. No one was behind me. The cold in the room suddenly deepened, prickling the back of my neck like static electricity. Before I could even process the shock, the bathroom door, the heavy wooden door that I had just walked through, swung shut violently on its own, slamming hard enough to rattle the walls around it. A deafening metallic thunk echoed through the small space. I lunged forward, grabbing the brass handle and twisting it. Nothing. The knob spun loosely in my hand, and the door refused to budge. I was trapped. From the ceiling above, the faint, echoing cries of a falling man sliced through the silence. I backed into the tile wall, panic seizing me as I stared at the door. Through the corner of my eye I saw movement. In the condensation in the mirror, a heavy, disembodied hand pressed itself from inside the glass, leaving a trail of watery frost. The low temperature in the bathroom plunged to an agonizing degree. The faint, echoing cries of a falling man seemed to ricochet through the ceiling above. I got up and began slamming my fist against the wooden door, shouting for help, but my voice was swallowed by the thick atmosphere. I closed my eyes, terrified of what I might see next. When I finally forced them open, the reflection in the fog mirror had vanished. The room temperature abruptly normalized, and with a sudden sharp pop, the bathroom doorknob caught. I wrenched it open and bolted straight for the lobby, knowing I would never sleep in this hotel again. Our third story is about the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. The clock in my cabin ticked past 2 a.m. I had rolled my eyes at the daytime tour guide's ghost stories, chalking up the tales of the haunted staterooms and phantom splashes to clever marketing. But as the old ship groaned in the dark, the quiet became suffocating. I decided to explore the empty, labyrinth-like corridors of the retired ocean liner just to prove to myself that being afraid of the dark was silly. I snuck down into the lower decks, the metallic scent of rust and seawater growing thicker with every step. The air grew aggressively cold, instantly freezing my breath into faint wisp in the hallway. I found myself in the bows of the ship near the infamous watertight door 13, where a young crew member had been tragically crushed during a routine drill. The heavy iron door loomed like a gaping mouth. I took a shaky step closer, the narrow flashlight beam illuminating a single blood-red rusted spot on the wall. Suddenly, an echoing, deafening, metallic shriek, like iron grinding violently against iron, rang out right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the black, claustrophobic shaft alley. The hallway was entirely empty. But then, the temperature plummeted another 10 degrees, and a heavy, soaking wet footprint materialized on the dry steel floor inches in front of my boots. More footsteps followed, wet and rhythmic, slapping the cold metal as if a phantom crew member was marching directly toward me. Panicking, I turned and sprinted blindly through the bowed, never-ending corridor, my lungs burning and heart jackhammering in my ribs. I burst into the area of the first-class swimming pool. The massive room was bathed in eerie shadows. I stopped to catch my breath, my hands on my knees, taking big gulps of air when I heard it. the unmistakable, crystal-clear laughter of a little girl echoing from the deep end of the drained pool, followed by the wet, slapping sound of splashing in water. I shined my trembling flashlight into the massive basin. There was no water, but standing dead center in the pool, looking up at me, was the soaking wet silhouette of a little girl holding a ruined teddy bear. She tilted her head, her dark, empty eyes fixing on mine. Before I could even scream, the laughter abruptly cut out, and the little girl dissolved into the pitch-black air. I didn't care about trying to prove to myself that there was nothing to be scared of, or debunking any more scary ghost stories about this ship. I bolted for the stairs, the sound of phantom splashes echoing behind me all the way back to my cabin. Our fourth story is about the Hawthorne Hotel in Salem, Massachusetts. I checked in at 3 p.m., relieved to escape the cold autumn air. The brass fixtures in the lobby gleamed, and the antique charm of the building made the hotel seem like you were stepping into a different century. I hauled my luggage up the stairs to the 3rd floor, counting the door numbers until I came upon my room. Room number 325. Turning the key to my room, I clumsily hefted my bags inside and began unpacking. Once that was done, I took a hot shower and decided to turn in early, tired from a long day of traveling. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a sudden drop in temperature. The room was freezing, despite the radiator clicking nearby. I sat up, my heart pounding, and glanced towards the bathroom. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and the overhead light was on. As I watched in horror, the faucet handles turned on their own. A steady stream of water began splashing into the basin. Then there was an audible splash, as if someone had just dropped a bar of soap in the water. It's just the old plumbing, I told myself, gripping the sheets tightly. But then I heard it. A faint, hollow sound coming from the bathroom, the sound of a young child sobbing. I bolted out of my bed, intending to flee into the hallway, but the room's main door wouldn't budge. The deadbolt was still turned, but the heavy brass handle began violently rattling. It jerked back and forth as if an angry mob was trying to force their way in. Before I could scream, the room shifted. A swift, icy breeze swept through, and I was thrown backward against a wall, unable to move. My eyes were pulled toward the dresser mirror. The reflection looking back at me was warped, and standing right behind my translucent figure in the glass was a woman in a long white dress. Her face was obscured, but I could feel her cold eyes fixed on me. Suddenly, the bathroom light blew out, plunging the room into pitch black darkness. The water shut off instantly. In the suffocating silence that followed, a heavy, disembodied whisper grazed my ear. "Get out." I scrambled in the dark, threw open the door, and ran out into the hallway barefoot. I didn't stop running until I hit the brightly lit lobby, leaving all my belongings behind in room 612. Our fifth story is about the Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio, Texas. I booked a room at the Emily Morgan Hotel simply because I loved Gothic architecture, and its location was right across from the Alamo. What I didn't know until I checked in was that the 12th floor used to be the surgical ward when the building was a medical facility, and I was about to learn exactly why it was called the third most haunted hotel in the U.S. I fell asleep to the soft, distant hum of the city, but jolted awake at exactly 3:14 a.m. The room was freezing. I reached for the thermostat on the wall, but my hand stopped halfway. The air didn't just feel like winter, it was thick and heavy, carrying a faint, suffocating odor of antiseptic and ointment that I certainly hadn't noticed when I unpacked. Then, the silence was shattered by a sound I'll never forget. Out in the hallway, the metallic rattle of rickety casters and squeaking rubber wheels echoed through the thick wooden door, sounding like a hospital gurney was rolling slowly past my room. I could hear it stop right outside my door, followed by the sound of agonizing, disembodied weeping from the corridor. I held my breath as I stared at the door, willing it to stay shut. Through the frosted glass transom above the entry, a sudden, unnatural blue light flickered into my room. The weeping grew louder, shifting from the hallway into my actual room. I scrambled to turn on the bedside lamp, but it wouldn't click on. Suddenly, the bathroom faucet turned on by itself, blasting at full force. A chill ran down my spine as I felt a pull to turn around and look at the full-length mirror behind me. The reflection staring back at me wasn't mine. Instead of my own face, the mirror showed the brightly lit interior of an operating room from another era. I saw blurred, dark figures hovering over a metal table, a ghostly surgeon dressed in white. Then, a nurse in a 1920s uniform slowly turned her head in the reflection and looked directly into my eyes. She let out a silent scream, her mouth stretching into a dark abyss, her eyes black as coal. I blinked, gasping for air, but the terrifying vision vanished instantly. The mirror was just a mirror again, reflecting the dark, empty room. I scrambled for my shoes, bolting out of the room, and ran for the elevators. As the doors finally slid open to the lobby, I realized I didn't care about the rest of my reservation. I was out. Our sixth and final story is about the Lord Baltimore Hotel in Baltimore, Maryland. I've always been a bit of a history nerd. When I booked my weekend getaway at the Lord Baltimore Hotel, I knew it was famously historic and a survivor of the city's changing eras. I didn't think much of the haunted reputation, even though it's known as one of the most haunted hotels in the nation. I had requested a room on one of the higher levels, and they gave me room 1905. The trouble started as soon as I checked in. I was exhausted from the drive down from Pennsylvania, so I stepped into the elevator, hit the button for the 19th floor, and closed my eyes. When the brass doors dinged, I stepped out into the hallway. The first thing I noticed was how icy the air was. It felt noticeably colder compared to the heated lobby. I walked down the quiet hall to my door, letting myself in and tossing my weekender bag on the luggage rack. Needing caffeine, I decided to go back downstairs to find a coffee shop. As I walked back to the elevator, a sound echoed from further down the hallway. Thump, thump. It was the rhythmic sound of a bouncing rubber ball. I paused, peering down the dim corridor. Standing just around a distant corner was a little girl wearing a long, old-fashioned white dress and dark, scuffed shoes. She was facing the wall, but I could hear the ball bouncing relentlessly on the floor. "Hey, kiddo," I called out, taking a few steps closer. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The bouncing stopped abruptly. The little girl turned slowly, but her face was obscured by the shadows. I reached my hand toward my pocket to pull out my phone, intending to call the front desk. The moment I touched my phone, the screen flickered and died, despite having a full charge when I left my room. The little girl didn't speak. Instead, she took a single, unnaturally fast step toward me. A wave of bone-chilling dread washed over me, the kind that makes it hard to breathe. I turned and ran for the elevator, slamming my finger into the down button. The brass door slid open immediately, welcoming me into the lit interior. I scrambled inside and pressed the button for the main lobby. Just as the doors began to close, the elevator shook violently and jolted to an abrupt stop. The lights inside the elevator flickered, buzzed, and died. Complete pitch black. I was paralyzed, holding my breath in the dark, when I heard it again. The exact same thump, thump of a bouncing ball, only this time it was inside the elevator with me. I felt a sudden, icy cold hand gently brush against the back of my neck, startling me, making me scream and flail my arms and back against the wall of the elevator. The lights suddenly clicked back on with a loud snap. The elevator began to move smoothly downward, opening up into the warm, bustling, and brightly lit lobby. I didn't even go back to the room to grab my bag. I ran straight to the front desk, threw my room key onto the marble counter, and told the attendant I had to check out immediately. He looked at me with a weary, knowing expression, slowly nodded, and didn't even ask why. I made it out to my car and drove straight home, but even now, I can still hear the phantom bounce of that red ball echoing in my ears. And that is all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed these 6 famous haunted hotels and scary stories. Would you ever stay in any of these hotels? I know I would. But anyways, until next time. You've been listening to Don't Whistle to the Wind. And as the tale ends, the candles have burned down to nothing, and the salt lines we drew have surely failed as the shadows have crept in. Don't let them catch you, and don't turn off the light.